Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird, true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. This is my channel's weekly compendium, ending Monday, August 22nd, 2022. Case file number 726, written by Mokwa. The moon teleported. I've been struggling to find the words to describe what exactly happened on July 2nd, 2022. At around 10 p.m. that night, the moon moved. Me and my mom were driving down a completely straight road on our way to the theaters. She had noticed the moon maybe 5 minutes before the incident, and we both looked in awe at a red light. It was a beautiful night and it was still light outside. I'm located in Alberta, Canada. Mere minutes later, I noticed the moon had moved pretty significantly in the sky. I drew a rough sketch of what it sort of looked like here. I immediately told my mom, "Hey, is it just me or did the moon move?" And she looked a little scared because she had just noticed it as well. We never left that road. We didn't turn a different lane or anything. If that would even result in any major difference in the moon's location, it literally just moved in the sky. And it gets worse. We arrived in the parking lot at the theaters and the moon was still in its secondary position. Something deep inside told me not to pay it any attention and to just look away. I'm not like this at all. I'm very deer in headlights when it comes to something that's scaring me. I always stop, wait, and stare at the unexplained until I can find an answer. And I'm mad I wasn't looking because as soon as I felt it was okay to look up, the moon had returned to its original location. At this point, me and my mom were completely freaked out. We were parked in an unmoving vehicle and the moon had moved across the sky in a matter of seconds. We still have no idea how to rationalize what we witnessed. Later that night, I looked up the phrase, "moon moved," on Twitter to possibly see if anyone had posted about it, and they did. Just one other person somewhere in America tweeted around the same time, "The moon just freaking moved?" If anyone has any similar experiences, please let me know, especially if it happened on July 2nd too. Case notes for file 726. The moon teleported. Anyone else get Truman Show vibes from this? I did. Although, certainly not from the same perspective as the person on the show, because two people saw it, and they were able to verbalize it to other people as well, so they're not the ones in the show, the whole planet is the show. So maybe aliens are involved here? Or maybe some government conspiracy? It's curious, because there's many stories about the moon itself being some sort of hologram. It's not made of cheese, it just might not be made at all. Of course, if I'm being honest, I do believe the moon is real. I think we probably did go there. You can bounce a laser off the mirror they placed on the moon and have it return. So it seems like at least we sent something there, and it does actually physically exist. Should just be some giant solid piece of rock that broke off from Earth from a giant impact billions of years ago, and then it formed into a solid sphere. But if that is the case, what the hell is going on with all these holographic issues? I mean, the moon teleporting in different locations as in this story, or another story where there was just a ripple line like a hologram from top to bottom, fading through it, like it was just a projection in the sky, like the bat signal or something. How does that happen? And I fully believe this one since it's two people that saw it happen, and even questioning their own sanity so they didn't want to say it to each other. You can't quite fake that. Plus someone else mentioned they saw it too. But then why only 3 people? Obviously something happened, but if it's a holographic projection, more than 3 people would have seen it, presumably. Maybe just no one wants to say it for fear of being labeled insane. I think that fear does come into play more than we might expect. But to confirm it all, I suppose I'll just have to book a space flight with a pit stop on the moon from Elon Musk. He wants to go to Mars. As long as I can come back, I would love to do that. I'll be introducing special exclusive videos on my Patreon. I'll be focusing on videos that are a bit more testy, not exactly suitable for YouTube. Generally, I think it'll be fictional horror stories. Be careful who you mess with. They might just cast a spell of karmic love on you. If that interests you, come on over. Now on to the next story. Creepy file number 43. Written by Drama Affectionate 381. Parental Discombobulation. Hello. I, 27 female, and married to my husband, 31 male, and we have 2 children, fake names. Isaac, 8 male, from my first marriage, and Tiana with my now husband, 5 female. I am very distraught right now because I have been seeing this woman almost everywhere I go, and I have no idea if this is happening by coincidence, and I'm trying to be calm as I write this. This whole situation started somewhere around May 2022, where me and Isaac were at the local park, just doing our own thing. My son was playing with some other child at the monkey bars when I saw this woman approach me. She had red hair, pretty sure it was natural, and her face seemed tear-stained. I became concerned as I thought she was crying. I proceeded to ask her what was wrong, if she was alright, but she kept staring at my son. The more she looked at him, the more she sobbed. Then, all of a sudden, she sprints to him, running, screaming, "Michael!" She kept calling him that and it freaked me out. I mean, she was running to my kid and calling him a different name. My son and the other child got scared and I approached them before she did, as I was faster than her. I then screamed at her to get lost, but she just stood there as I held my son and she seemed pretty enraged. She then muttered some things, but I could not hear her as she stomped away. The other child's father and I talked for a bit, and he seemed alarmed by what happened. He predicted that she was probably a grieving mother and that my son looked like the child she lost. I was still disturbed and took my son home. Since then, I have been afraid to take any of my children into public areas despite my husband's reassurance. Skip to June 2nd, 2022. I get a call from my school stating that a woman, who was a new volunteer for lunch duty, kept mentioning that my son was her Mikey Bear and that she'd been looking for him for years. They told me that another volunteer who had been working with her reported this. I was scared as hell, and I acted immediately by signing my kids out for the day. When I called the school the next day, I was informed she was no longer there, so I became pretty freaked out again. Skip to last week, July 13th, 2022. It was Tiana's 5th birthday, and we decided to host it at a park in my in-laws' hometown. Everything went well, although I was paranoid. It was then somewhere around 9 p.m. when we began tidying up, and as I looked at the many oak trees behind, I could have sworn I saw her. I screamed at the top of my lungs and started chasing after her, but she somehow got away. Ever since then, I have not seen her, but I feel like this is not the end of it. I am seriously considering homeschooling my children because of what has happened. The police were on their way. The police were somewhat helpful. They were here from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. We told them about the incident with the woman and thankfully they were able to get a hold of her information from the school. The information she handed in about herself may possibly be fake. That is still not confirmed yet. The cops did say that they were going to interview the woman who was volunteering alongside her, as well as the children and teacher in my son's classroom. A police report has been filed though. Some of you guys mentioned that she could be associated with my deceased ex, and I just realized my son does look awfully like his dad, so I'm scared as hell right now. She could be a crazy ex or family member, but I have only known her through this situation. That's it. I don't freaking know. Bonus file, written by Throwaway Target, Sucks Pins. The Steel-Toed Spirit. My friend lost their father. At the time, I wasn't close enough with them and their friends and family to attend the funeral they were holding for him, at least not comfortably, but I stayed at their house to wait for them to get back. That way, we could hang out and I could be there to support them. Friend leaves their house at around 6 p.m. with their other 2 family members, leaving me at their home completely alone. Fast forward and it's getting late, around 10 p.m., so I'm basically expecting my friend to be back at any second. My friend's dad was a construction worker and always wore steel-toed boots that were loud as they walked around the 1-story house with wood floors. But my friend also wears steel-toed boots as they have a profession that requires them to as well. Important fact, their dad's room was directly across the hall from theirs, meaning you always heard their parents walking down the hall and going in and out of the room. 10-15 rolls around, I hear work boots walking down the hall. I got excited because I was extremely bored waiting for my friend and knew they were finally home. But then the sound of the boots entered the parents' room across the hall and I heard the door shut, loud and clear. I waited in confusion, thinking maybe my friend was just doing something personal. 10 minutes go by and they still haven't come out of the parents' room. I then decided to walk out of the friend's room to find that the entire house, including the parents' room, is dark. No sign of anyone being home. Complete darkness and silence. At this point, I'm even more confused. Now, I decided to text my friend and ask, "What's taking so long for you to come back to your room? Is everything okay?" Thinking maybe they didn't turn the light on for some reason in their parents' room. They respond that the funeral just ended and they're finishing up cleaning up to leave where it was being held shortly. Nobody was even home yet. I'll never forget this moment for probably the rest of my life. Case notes for the bonus file. The steel-toed spirit. There's a certain comfort in this. It almost feels like astral projection, but from a spirit that already passed away. And I think it is the same thing. When we're astral projecting, we're effectively decoupling the spirit from the body, even though we're still alive, and then it can come back. But I think that's sort of what echoes are. So if we die and quantum immortality is true, the majority of our spirit or essence or soul is transposed to another universe. But some of it still remains behind, a tiny fragment or echo, as I like to say. And they behave sort of as we do, but they're just copies. They're not entirely us. They're not animated in the same way. So they may have certain emotions that linger, and that's why they're tethered to a certain spot, because they don't have any other choice. They don't know anything else. But it is beautiful in a way, and I read the comment that you left in the thread where your friend felt a cathartic response to hearing this story. As in, yeah, your dad is still there, in many different ways. I think he's okay. To give relief from such a grave tragedy is just incredible. Perhaps you should tell him about quantum immortality. Maybe he would find even more solace and emotional support from knowing that his dad is probably still around in a different universe. He doesn't even know anything happened. Case file number 727. Written by Cyanix. I witnessed my daughter's soul enter her body. My beautiful daughter is now nearly 9 years old. I was pregnant with her when I was 18, and she was born when I was 19. I remember when I was around 18 weeks pregnant, I was finally over morning sickness and the heartburn was yet to kick in. I basically had about 3 weeks between them where I felt okay. I was sitting in my partner's attic bedroom in his parents' house. It was always a creepy place, being a big old building and had several paranormal encounters there, but this one was different. We were talking about labor plans, where I was going to live after she came. Not relevant, but I moved back to my mama's house when she was expected. This pure white orb, absolutely tiny, but with the most calming presence, appeared and was floating around in front of my face. We both saw it. It was playful and sweet, just as my DD always has been. The next thing I know, it darted into the top of my teensy tiny second trimester bump. And that was the first time I felt her movements. I've always had somewhat of an affinity with ghostly presences, starting with a not-so-imaginary friend who I stopped seeing when we moved houses when I was around 4. I know it sounds mental, but I've always believed it was her spirit joining with her body. The way I felt in the presence of that orb is exactly how I feel in the presence of my wonderful girl. Thanks for listening. Has anyone else experienced anything like this? I really do feel as if it was the first time I ever met my baby. Case notes for file 727. I witnessed my daughter's soul enter her body. I just want to say that this is a beautiful story. And the whole concept of the orbs that people report seeing throughout life, that they're just souls that are fragment or energized, full, not just echoes, fragments of souls, but fully realized souls that are trying to find their way back to their body or just to a new body. Like in your case here, your baby wasn't fully animated yet, and then it was. Makes sense. I mean, I guess it doesn't have to be some visual thing that we could see with our own eyes, but it does make sense that there would be some sort of visual cue, because I imagine souls have a lot of energy. It's almost like connecting a controller wirelessly to a computer. There's a signal, a real physical connection that happens there, or a real energetic connection, so to say. And you know, something interesting just crossed my mind. I remember my mom telling me something similar to this. I don't know if there was an orb involved, but I remember she said something happened to her while she was pregnant with me, and it made her believe in more than the mundane, let's say. I don't know if it was an orb, but I know she said something entered her body while she was pregnant, and she thinks it affected me. A very interesting thought. Creepy file number 44, written by Anonymous. Pure primal fear. My boyfriend, 23 male, and I, 23 female, recently decided that we wanted to take the new tent we bought on its first trip. The tent was one that hooks up to your car to provide more storage space, and we were excited to try it out. We had planned a kayaking trip the next day at a kayak rental shop. It was supposed to be a nice, inexpensive, outdoorsy weekend getaway. We tend to book things last minute, so all the state parks and professional campgrounds were full. This led us to a website that is essentially an Airbnb for camping. The place we chose was a 100-acre property just 20 minutes south of the kayak shop. Of all the sites in the area, it was described as having working bathrooms, showers, it allowed for campfires, and all the sites were car accessible, important for a car-dependent tent. This site was also the most reviewed in the area, with 3 5 out of 5 star reviews. The area was very rural, so we did not think much about the low number of reviews for any of the campsites. The renter was Mary, who only ever texted us updates, but seemed sweet. We started our 2-hour drive a bit later than anticipated, which put us behind the 11 a.m. time we had originally informed the host we would arrive at, but we tried to keep her updated with the new schedule. She just told us to let her know when we arrive at the address she sent us. We arrive at the address and are greeted with the barn from the pictures. It had string lights lit up all over it, seemed fairly new, and just gave off a nice feel to it. We sat in the car for a minute and struggled with cell service to text the host to let her know we had arrived. 10 minutes after our text sends, a sweaty man who appears to be in his late 60s pulls up in an ATV. He lets us know he is the father-in-law to Mary, and she is busy taking care of the seasonal harvest and sends him instead. He lets us know we can take the car anywhere on the property and offers to show us around on the ATV. My boyfriend, visibly uncomfortable, declines the offer and asks a few more questions about the woods and how far into them we are allowed to take the car. Anywhere. We can go anywhere, and the ATV man even offers to help pull my car out if it gets stuck. We ask one final question about cell service, and he jokes that if we are from around here, we will understand that reception works better on one side of the barn than the other. I am from around here, and thought it was funny. But once he said that, I realized he didn't have any ounce of an accent for here like he should. Eventually, he leaves and we begin exploring the property on foot. The barn has all the lights on in the middle of the day, and it looks nice and maintained. It is insulated and has a working kitchen. The only warning we got was not to drink the water. It seemed like a place that would host a small 50-guest wedding. We walked past the shed out behind the barn to get to the trails that ran through the woods. After going through a hike that my car would have never survived, we decided it might be best to just camp by a small creek, and we chose a spot on the side opposite the barn. We were still within walking distance, but we used my car as a buffer to feel a bit more isolated. We chose our spot and then go into the main town to eat and walk around. We message Mary about the fire policy, and she tells us that they will deliver a fire ring to the barn for us to take to the camp. We arrived back at the barn about an hour and a half away from nighttime. We drove by the barn and the lights had been turned off. We assumed it was on a timer so as to not waste energy or money. We also noticed the fire ring had not yet been delivered. We start the grueling 30-minute setup in the sticky heat and reward ourselves with a sit in the air-conditioned car after. We notice it looks like it's about to rain, so my boyfriend and I pull out a card game and wait for it to pass in the car. It only lasted about 10 minutes, but it is starting to sunset. The tent held up nicely, so we felt okay leaving it for a second. Needing to use the bathroom, we started walking to the barn. As we crossed the creek, we hear what sounds to be like someone in the shed behind the barn. They sound like they're moving things around. A bit unsettling, but I tell my boyfriend that maybe they used equipment today and it's just sitting in there making the cracking cool-off noise that equipment sometimes does. We get to the barn and the lights are still off, but the fire ring is there. We go in and check to make sure the power is off, and it is not just the lights outside. None of the light switches will work, so we assume the power is cut. Again, maybe it's just on a timer, no worries. We step out of the barn and get 10 feet away and we hear a hum in the distance to the opposite side of the shed. The power to the barn is restored. Maybe it's the weather. We change direction to use the bathroom. As soon as we step inside, the power cuts again and the hum stops. I start to get a weird feeling, and I can tell he has it too. I look at my boyfriend and say, maybe they're watching us. I immediately followed up with, no, that's a lot worse. We walk back outside and the lights turn on. My boyfriend says that we need to leave, and I have the same gut-wrenching primal fear. We put the ring back by the barn since we had moved it 10 feet, and the barn lights start flickering. We briskly walk back to the car. The 30-minute setup was torn down in 5 minutes, and we jumped in the car and locked it. I managed to get my car going, thanking God that the rain did not get my car stuck. We started towards the driveway, and just as we made it to the road, my boyfriend looked back and saw a man standing by the shed watching us. As soon as my car pulls off onto the road, we get a text from Mary letting us know that the fire ring is out by the barn. She also informs us that we are welcome to stay in the barn if the rain has messed up our camping experience. We arrive at a nice hotel, willing to splurge for safety. At this point, it's 10 p.m. at the earliest. A sweet older lady checks us in. Desperate for validation and just comfort from anyone, we tell her what had just happened to us at the campsite. She looks shocked. She asks if we had seen the news lately, to which we both respond that we had not. The lady tells us that couples in the state have been going missing. All of them had gone camping. 3 couples were truly missing, and one was recently found on the side of the freeway, slashed to near death. They are, to the time of posting, still recovering in the hospital. We couldn't find many articles about where in the state, but the look on the lady's face suggested it was near us. We get to our room and text Mary back to tell her we are not staying anymore. Thank you for staying with us. We lock the door to our hotel room and I break down into tears. I will not forget that feeling I got at the barn. The primal fight or flight feeling and the feeling of being watched. I feel it in my throat just writing this. I never want to experience that again. Case notes for creepy file number 44. Pure primal fear. I think trusting your gut is always the correct answer. Who knows what that old man was up to? I mean, who knows if Mary even existed? Maybe it was just part of some ploy to get people to go there. It is peculiar that there were 3 other 5-star reviews, so it may be that Mary is real and she doesn't even know this is going on. Maybe this old guy is just creeping the place and waiting for people to park in sometimes and then try to ambush them when they're vulnerable. Or yeah, Mary doesn't exist and this is all some scam to kill people or just terrorize them. But he doesn't do it all the time, otherwise, well, it wouldn't really work out. Negative reviews, yeah, there's some creepy guy trying to kill us. Don't go there. That's one thing I do like about Airbnb, is that they have pretty stringent background checks and verification processes for the hosts, so it's unlikely you're going to rent a place from some serial killer. Never impossible, I suppose, but yeah. Always be careful. And I would definitely inform the police if you haven't already. Give them a heads up, and if enough people do inform them of the same property, they may be able to investigate. Case file number 728, written by Salty Sweet 420, The Chobani Mystery. I keep a close track of everything I eat, counting calories and trying to limit myself so I don't binge. I keep a list on my calendar app of everything I eat every day of the week, listing times, calories if I know them, serving sizes, and so on. Today, at around 1:30 p.m., I decided to eat my first food of the day. I had only woken up a few hours ago and didn't feel that hungry, but I knew it was best to eat something so I could at least function. I decided to eat a Chobani flip. I checked the fridge. The only one we had left was a key lime pie flavored one. It was on top of a container of beef stew, and next to what I think was a container of fruit and some energy drink. I don't remember exactly. It was set diagonally. I know for a fact it was the last one because I checked behind it for others and there were none. I went to the living room so I could eat while watching TV. I eat slowly as it makes me feel less hungry. I remember every bite I took vividly. I also remember writing it down in the notes for today in my calendar. I remember eating the whole thing, toppings and all. I even chewed on the plastic cover for a bit before getting up and throwing it away in the trash in the kitchen. I sat on my phone for a few minutes, scrolling through Twitter or something. At around 1:46, I thought, I should drink some water so I'm not hungry later. So I went to the fridge to get a water bottle. Then I noticed the yogurt I had just eaten was in the same spot it had been before. At first I thought I had zoned out and instead of throwing it away, I put it back in the fridge. But it was completely full, unopened. It didn't even have bite marks on the packaging, and it was so cold it's not like someone put it in there and I just didn't notice. The only other person home is my mom, and she's been upstairs on the phone or something for about half an hour. I don't know. I can just hear her talking from downstairs because she never closes her door. She couldn't have come down. I would have known because the stairs that go upstairs and downstairs are in the living room where I was eating. For a while I just sat there and thought, did I imagine eating it? Was there another that I just didn't notice? Did my mom somehow teleport downstairs and put another one in the fridge? Did someone else come in, replace it, and leave? Why would anyone do that? There's no point. I then thought to check my calendar app to see if I ever even ate it, or at least logged it down. I looked and the log wasn't there. I checked the other dates to see if it was there and I just put it on the wrong date. Nothing. I'm so confused. What happened? Did I imagine eating it, really? I didn't fall asleep. My dreams are very strange and I can often tell when I'm dreaming because it looks faded and I don't have any actual features, just a vague silhouette of a body. But I remember seeing how I grabbed the spoon and thinking it was funny. I never learned how to hold pencils and cutlery, so I just hold them however is most comfortable at the moment. Seeing myself and the yogurt in the mirror across the couch, seeing myself and the yogurt in a reflection of the TV before I turned it on. So what's going on? If there's a logical explanation, please tell me. Is this just déjà vu or fake memory or something? I added as much detail as possible because I really want an explanation for this. It sounds silly, but it's really stressing me out. I'm scared that I went to a different dimension where I didn't need it or something. Case file number 729, written by Sin Samila. He foretold his own demise. Roughly 10 years ago, I was a restless 15-year-old developing a range of mental issues that led to a heavy substance addiction a few years later, all caused by an emerging borderline personality disorder. I'm almost 4 years clean now, I think. I found a sort of balance, so I'm happy for myself. I'm saying all this to paint the picture of those difficult years and the impact this event had on me. At the time, I met a person in school, LL, notorious for being the edgy emo that sings in a metal band, and me being the wannabe edgy emo girlfriend of a metal band kid, I was super invested. He was particularly weird, not in tune with this world. He lived in his own reality, and having to survive in this world was hard. Like he had difficulty understanding the basic rules of this society, and I related so much with that. Once, he fought with his parents and walked 20 kilometers in the middle of the night and walked through the woods just to come to my garden, left a heartfelt page letter on my patio, and spent the night walking through the countryside near my village. I still have that letter. On the other hand, I had a hard time believing what he was saying to me. His stories were a little too good. He always found himself in shenanigans or adventures, and I took these as stories, nothing more. We still enjoyed each other's company as a weird, infamous smoking emo couple. But there was a story he told in secrecy with such heartfelt emotions that it struck me, and I vividly remember that day. He confessed to me that he believed that he was an indigo child, and he knew when he would die. I was perplexed but intrigued, and asked for more information. Throughout his life, he always had this realization or intrusive thought that accompanied him, and he came to accept this fate. LL would die at 19 in a lot of pain. He saw besides himself blood and syringes, and no drugs involved, only a cut. We severed contact sometime after, when my substance addiction inevitably drove me away from all my previous close friends. Years later, I was 17 and still in high school. I remember that particular moment so clearly in my mind, like this happened yesterday. We were preparing to leave for the day at 1 p.m., and in the halls a large number of people were in clear shock. I asked one of my friends what all the fuss was about, and she told me that LL was killed. My first reaction? I laughed. For a second in my delusional mind, I thought that he was trolling everyone or trying to joke, leveraging on the fact that he always exaggerated stories about himself. For 15 minutes, I was blissfully delusional until someone else had more details. He was riding his bike with his bandmates to practice. When crossing the street, a driver on a big truck transporting gravel didn't see him and crushed him under the wheels of the vehicle. But at the time, LL wasn't dead. He was immediately transferred to an ambulance where he died, surrounded by pools of his own blood and paramedics trying to deal with multiple organ damage and internal bleeding. In that precise moment, what he said to me years prior resurfaced in my memory, and I literally froze. I could see myself in a third-person perspective. There was my life before, and then there was my life after that event. I really don't know how LL predicted his death, knowing so much that he described the exact moment to me, down to the circumstances and his precise age. After this, I really don't know what to think. I don't have any conclusions. I'm just afraid. I'm still baffled to this day. If you have similar stories, please share. I really need to try to understand what's happening here. How is this possible in a world where the future isn't already written? Case notes for file 729. He foretold of his own demise. I'm truly sorry for your bewildering loss. I wonder how he felt, fully believing that he was going to die and he was predicting his own death years before. To believe you're going to die, I suppose that explains a lot of his actions. He just didn't care because he didn't think he'd be around for very long. I really hope he was able to cherish every moment. I also hope that he's still rocking around in some alternate universe. If quantum immortality is true, which I really do believe, then he probably is. Now also related to free will and how this story can be true while free will is still true as well and valid. Okay, so how do I explain this? Think of life as a long road, only there are branching paths everywhere. Every choice we can make is a different path, and we have to walk it. We have to actively choose which path we go down. Of course, we don't know where the path is going to end, and every single potential choice is another branching path in this long road of life. Now, your friend may have been able to predict the path that he was going to take, but he still had to choose to take it. And it was only one possible path of almost infinite, gazillions, googleplexes of possible variations and choices we can make. That's why there are so many alternate universes. Every potential branching path is a new universe spawned, where in that universe you took that path. Now, to actually know which path they're going to take is impossible. But if you had enough computational power, like a Matryoshka brain, which is like an entire solar system, or is it a galaxy of just pure computing power, then maybe you could predict where the path would go, but only one singular path. It's like someone foretold the future and then transmitted that information into his mind, and then he just went with it. The future that he would take after seeing the future. That's quite a play. In the end though, we can't know every single path. In fact, we can't really know even 2 branches ahead. We just have to be very mindful of the choices we make, because they're so unknown. Case file number 730, written by Baker New, 6764, Melrose Place, in the future. So this happened in the 90s. I had thought that I saw an episode of the TV show Melrose Place, and everyone in my family and extended family was enthralled by it. So one night, as a teenager, I was watching late night TV. I remember that I clearly saw one of the characters that was killed off on the show, accident, head trauma, I can't remember exactly what, came back to life. That she had a scar across her head and a wig that had covered it up pretty good. So So we are all sitting around the living room watching the next installment of Melrose Place, and I stated out loud that I'd seen the episode before, and Kimberly comes back from the dead and has a massive scar under that wig. Everyone immediately started berating me and making fun of me. "That's one hell of a wig," I replied. "I swear that's what's gonna happen." More insults and laughter ensue. Fine, you'll all see. The TV show hadn't shown that episode yet, but I'd watched it somehow. A few weeks later, we are all doing the same thing, watching the new episode, and sure enough, Kimberly had come back from the dead and had a huge scar under a wig. They all looked at me strangely after that. Case notes for file 730, Melrose Place, in the future. So first, I do think this is a glitch, but it's possible that there's just a simple explanation that the network aired the TV shows out of order. They actually messed up with a show that no one probably knows, little thing called Firefly, where they aired the episodes out of order. And of course, this caused a lot of issues and poor ratings because people didn't know what the hell was going on. The show was supposed to start, but they were playing like the 6th episode or something. It was still cool, but obviously doesn't quite compute. So it's possible that's what happened. You just saw an episode that was already recorded and just aired earlier than it should have. Now, assuming this isn't the case, as I discussed before in a different case notes, I view timelines and our choices as a branching path line. So with enough information, it's conceivable that you could have predicted what would happen in the future. And given that these episodes are already recorded well in advance, that data is sort of already there, even in the present moment. You just didn't know it. Somehow it was transmitted into your brain. I don't know how or why, but it is conceivable. Much more than predicting the future years in advance, which is just outstanding. In a nutshell, I view life as a series of dominoes, a lot of dominoes, where you can knock one down and it'll send a ripple wave throughout all the universe, and that's the Big Bang. Everything spawned from there, and physics took over. Gravity slowly knocking down every domino. Thing is, we can choose where there are branching paths. You just remove one domino, and then a different one on the other side will continue along, and the domino chain is so long. And the thing is, we're all taking different choices throughout this pathway. So this long series of dominoes can be altered by anyone. We make those choices, somehow separate from the physics of the universe or incorporated in and animated by something beyond it. I don't know if that's God, I don't know if that's a server simulation, but something is above the universe that is allowing us to be above the physics, if that makes sense. Creepy file number 45. Written by Unpretty Habits. Meatball saved my life. A little backstory leading up to this meeting. I grew up in a shady area and would rarely leave home after 7 or 8 p.m. as it was considered dangerous. Going into high school, I got a pit bull. He was a gentle giant who loved everyone and everything. He had some protection work training before he joined our family. As he was getting older, he retired and I took him home with me. So back to the story. I was at this time 17 female, short, blonde, but very aware of my size. But having a big scary dog, I finally felt safe walking home alone. And on that very night, I had set out to take a longer walk as my dog, let's call him Meatball, really needed to run off some energy. I took him to the woods near my home and we walked along a gravel path that was partly lit. It was around 11 p.m. and quite dark outside. As we walked, I became aware of the fact that there really wasn't anyone else around. We walked for about 10 to 15 minutes before a man turned up behind us. We continued to walk, and I noticed he is taking the same turns as me and Meatball. I speed up, feeling my heart beating in my chest. Meatball, who normally spent his time sniffing at the end of the leash, was now also very aware of the situation. He had slowed down and gotten so close to my leg with full focus on this man. I started turning at every turn I could, and the man followed. Even though we were now walking in circles, he started getting closer and closer to us, as I am now sure he is following us. I remember something my father once told us. Never let anyone follow you, as you're most vulnerable from behind. If you get in a situation where you can force your stalker to pass you, do. I stopped, grabbed onto Meatball's leash. I leaned back in the leash, acting as if I had to put my entire body weight in holding him back. Now, I am aware that at this point in my life, I looked small and weak, But as my father is an old veteran, I could fight before I could walk, and even holding Meatball back was not much of a task as I was a lot stronger than I looked. Well, I called out, trying to sound as naive as I could, hoping that if I did have to fight, I would surprise him with my strength. "Excuse me, my dog really doesn't like people and I can't really hold him back when he lunges. If I step to the side, could you pass us so I have a chance at holding him back?" As I say this, Meatball starts barking, growling, and snapping towards the man, who has now stopped. He looks me up and down, stares at Meatball, and turns around, not saying a word. He left quickly, and I called my parents and asked them to meet me, as I now realize he could easily hide anywhere on a walk back. My dad showed up only a few minutes later, baseball bat in hand. Nothing really happened, but after being followed by this man at every turn I took for at least 35 minutes, I know this could have ended really badly if I had not had Meatball or my dad close by. Case file number 731, written by Zach the Logical, The Illusionary Store. When I was 9 or 10, my parents and I were on a very long road trip. I was a sickly child, so we traveled a lot to see specialists around the country. I believe it was in Michigan, where we were driving through a very rural area. Lots of forests, not many people. It didn't seem strange to me at the time, but looking back now, I realize how strange of a place it was for such a large store to be. It was a long way from a town in either direction. In a cramped clearing barely big enough to fit the store and parking lot, there was what looked like something like an Amish store on the side of the road. But it wasn't exactly that. It looked almost industrialized, like how a smaller Target or Walmart store would look if it were trying to be country. I don't remember exactly why we stopped there, but I know we didn't plan to beforehand. We walked inside and immediately my alarm bell started going off. I was young enough that I didn't really understand, but I remember telling my mom that I didn't like it there. We walked around for a bit, and I stopped my mom at an aisle full of country-style candy. That's when I noticed something specific that was wrong. Everyone else in the store looked incredibly vacant. They would stop to look at something on the wooden shelves for a few seconds, then move on one item at a time, almost robotic-like, and everyone was alone. No one interacted with anyone else, and it was very quiet. That's when I told my mom I wanted to leave, and I was very adamant about it. She was reluctant, but we met up with my dad, paid for our things, and left. My memory of this place is pretty vivid, but I remember absolutely nothing about the cashier or anyone else who worked there. I remember trying to explain why I felt so strongly once we were on the road again, but my parents were a little frustrated, and I was bad at explaining myself. A few months ago, I had a dream of a place like that, and the place was fresh on my mind again. When I saw my mom next, I brought it up to ask where it was, but she had no memory of the place. Even after I told her the whole story, she had no recollection of it ever happening. I asked my dad not too long after, and his reaction was the same. Even though we traveled a lot, we tend to remember the trips pretty well, so this was unusual. Any ideas why it was so eerie?